Right. Hello, everyone. This is Wmpyr back again with the killer method.
That's right.
Double Ronin. We're in the zone, so we decided to go back to back. We just finished one where we talked about the Van Damme movies, and now today's topic is gonna be what, bro?
Well, today's topic, we just came up with it. What if Bruce Lee never died? What would be his legacy? How would he have turned out in his life? And we came up with a lot of great things. And I'm going to start off because, in my opinion, I think of the martial art side of it. I never really thought of his movie side because his movies would have probably been the greatest movies of all time. But his martial arts side, he probably would have, in my opinion, developed into one of the greatest UFC or MMA coaches of all time. He said when he was alive that Jeet Kune Do was 50% Wing Chun and 50% everything else. So if he was still alive, seeing the stuff that happened in the 80s, the Valley Tudo tournaments, the shoot the box fighters, and then the early 90s with the explosion of the early UFC championships. I mean, Bruce Lee and his genius, if he was still alive, he would have taken all of these concepts. He would have taken all these styles. He would have meshed it together. It would have been genius, in my opinion, if he was still alive.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, bro?
Yeah, because kind of like what we were saying, we were talking in private earlier, that a lot of the things that he says, there's bits and pieces of a lot of great concepts that were way ahead of its time, and it was almost like he's a Nostradamus that he
He really
predicted
is.
the UFC before it even happened, and a lot of the things he was saying holds true today. And he didn't even get to
To
see
this
that.
day. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he studied. He did a lot of studying. So I have to imagine that he probably saw some Sambo tournaments because in the 70s they had Sambo. He probably saw some Greco-Roman tournaments. He probably saw Judo Gene LaBelle. You know, he had to have studied all of these great martial artists. So he had to have some ideas. But for one human being to say, hey, you know what? Sparring full contact with small gloves that are extremely similar to what we use today in UFC. You feel what I'm saying? Like he's way ahead of his time thinking in the way of martial arts. So yeah,
Yeah, because in Enter the Dragon, he
yeah,
wore gloves where you could grab, right? That
mm-hmm.
was the whole thing. Not only can you strike, but you could grab. And then he was wearing speedos like Valley Tudo tournament.
Yeah, yep. What was the other one? That Bass Rudin. They also wore those really tight ones too. I forget that tournament style.
Pancrase.
Pancrit. There we go. Yeah, that's also another one. Actually, that probably was around back in the day. He probably studied those tournaments as well.
Well,
Bruce Lee, that is.
I don't think those tournaments existed in what, the
Oh, they
60s?
weren't.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, because that came out right before the UFC.
Oh,
Slight,
so the '80s then. So it was. Oh, yeah, it was after Bruce Lee.
yeah, it was way after Bruce Lee. So yeah, when you think of the timeline like that, look, Bruce Lee's era was still the karate era. It wasn't even the kickboxing. Like kickboxing in the U.S. was like it wasn't even there yet. That people don't understand that because Joe Louis, which is one of the guys that he coached in the karate days, that dude is accredited a lot of times to being the father of American kickboxing. So kickboxing didn't even exist in the US at the time where Bruce Lee
Yeah,
was.
that's crazy.
And
But
he's
yeah, it was.
already
If you could imagine the Karate Kid style of tournaments, it was the
right.
point. Full contact.
And yeah, this guy was going, you know what? We need to change these tournaments into full contact. And kickboxing hadn't even exist yet and he was already like, well, let's also add the grappling.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this
And
is
if you notice the way that he fights in his movies, he doesn't fight stiff. He doesn't fight like a Wing Chun guy. He doesn't fight like a karate guy. He fights very fluent, very much like you will notice a boxer or a kickboxer even.
right. So yeah, those concepts were really amazing. Still hold up today. Now,
To this
like
day, definitely.
movie wise, the direction. Did you get to see the Game of Death? That not the Hollywood version, his version.
The original version, the 10 minutes,
Yeah.
where it was just his best work. I mean, can you imagine if he didn't pass away, he was able to finish that movie? That those 10 minutes of it was the last 10 minutes of the movie. We got to see him climb the tower, you know, the game of death. Right. It was by far his best work in his entire career. It was fantastic. So yeah, if he was able to continue his career, nobody could top him. I mean, so many martial arts movies would not even exist if Bruce Lee didn't pass away. Put it that way.
And you know, one of the things, do you remember the fight that he had with like Kareem, the original version? He's talking to himself, and you can hear his thoughts, and while he's fighting, and to me, that makes the fight scene like so much more like realistic.
Yeah. So no, definitely. Yeah, I love that fight scene. You know, fun fact about that movie that nobody really talks about, but Kareem Abdul's character had to wear really big sunglasses.
Yes.
His character, because for some reason he had like the sunshine would damage his eyes.
Right.
So the way Bruce Lee beat him is he would poke holes and he would damage his eyes. But there was a scene, there was a few seconds where you would see from the eyes of Kareem's character, it was a pink purple glare every time the sun hit his eyes, which was the inspiration for Vin Diesel's Chronicles of Riddick character, which is just a fun fact.
Wow.
From that movie. So, you know, I just wanted to throw that out.
Wow, I didn't know that. So his eyes kind of adapted to where he could. Yeah, where he could see in the dark maybe, but then under intense sunlight he can't see at all.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So they actually got the inspiration from a Bruce Lee movie, and this is years later, 1999, Pitch Black came out.
Yeah.
So even more talking about inspiration, even more inspiration of the world that Bruce Lee left behind. And nobody ever says that
one. Well, that's cool. But yeah, I definitely feel like his movies were headed in a direction where he was trying to make the movie more and more, the fight scenes in the movie more and more realistic. And he wanted to put actual fight lessons in there and teach the world about real fighting through his movies.
You know, that's true. You know, do you think he would have gone into a more of a tactical direction? Like he would have gone so realistic that he would have just learned weapons and just been a master of even weapon, you know, modern weapons, and not just, you know, the Wing, you know, on Wing Chun and hand to hand and knives and stuff. And he would have added guns to his movies.
Now there's some quotes that I have stuck in my head from the years of just personal research. You've done research, I've done research, and I don't know where it comes from, but I remember hearing that Bruce Lee's ultimate goal was to be able to fight a guy who has weapons and you're unarmed and you defeat the guy who has weapons. That was his goal. Whether the guy has a sword, a nunchuck, a staff, Escrima sticks, whatever, and you're barehanded. And that's what he was headed towards, is what I remember. I don't know where I got it. Was it a Danny Nosano interview? Was it one of his books? I don't know where I got the info from, but that's stuck in my head.
If any other person said it, I wouldn't believe it. But because it's Bruce Lee, you know Bruce Lee would have came up with a style to beat any man with weapons barehanded. Because you know Bruce Lee has that speed and he has that skill. That's something that only Bruce Lee can do. Nobody. I wish we could have seen that, because that's been amazing. Can you imagine? As a human being, as martial artist, I cannot take on somebody with guns, swords, knives, or what have you. I need something of myself. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the guy doesn't come across ever as a guy who would shoot low. He always shot for the stars. All of his goals were very high, right? So for him to be able to refine his system, that much to where he's wants to take on against guys with weapons. So that's
another level.
You're right. I just wish I could remember. Yeah, but as far as like MMA goes, you feel that the direction that he would have gone in there, obviously because of the age, he'd have to be a coach. He himself couldn't have been in there.
in my opinion, Bruce Lee is more of an outside range fighter. So he probably, in my opinion, would have created the best outside fighting system for MMA. He probably would have still had grappling in there, but he definitely, like, when you see a Jeet Kune Do practitioner, they're always very stylized. They're very strict in the way that they move, and you could tell that they have skill. It's not just like somebody winging out punches or winging out kicks. So if you could envision a Bruce Lee style person fighting on the outside,
Yeah.
with a lot of skill and a lot of precision, just that's what I envision, and he would have created a whole style like that, an outside fighting style.
Well,
In my opinion, that's probably what he would have done.
to me, that kind of describes John Jones.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, definitely. Yeah, definitely.
Not only well rounded, but can really fight in that outside range. And Bruce at the time was also during racist times, he was very friendly towards he kind of broke down that door. He didn't, he was obviously against racism and stuff. So in that sense, he probably could have had a lot of great friends that were phenomenal athletes, like the Kareem,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe
talking about Bruce Lee and racism, because Bruce Lee, he's half Asian, half American. He has both of those things going for him. So he started off his career in America, in Hollywood, and then he decided to go to China. So when he went to China, he got the love of that culture, but then he wanted to make it big. He wanted to become a big Hollywood star. He wanted to go back to Hollywood, where he had failed before,
right.
with Green Hornet, where he wasn't the main lead role guy. He made his bones in China, making a few extra movies. He was like, no, let me come back to America and really, really shine. And he was starting to teach Americans, and he started getting racism from his own people. Chinese that loved him started hating him because he was teaching non-Chinese people his ways and stuff. So he had to deal with the racism from Americans and from Chinese. So he did not have an easy life. He had to deal with a lot of adversity from both sides. It didn't get easy for him.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, but definitely also he comes across, the type of guy that he's not going to let a person say, you can't do that. He's not going to listen to naysayers. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
He has a big
he
vision.
Comes off of that. He's the ultimate. Yeah. He's the ultimate, like, man's man. Like, he's just like a dominant force. You can almost feel his gravity every time he walks into a room. Yeah, he always has that thing about him.
Right, for sure. So yeah.
Like Steve McQueen was another guy that used to train with Bruce Lee, actually.
Yes. Yeah, and Steve McQueen at the time was like the #1 action movie star in Hollywood, right?
Oh yeah, by far at that point. Yeah, he was the man. He would do a lot of his own stunts. A drinker. He was smoking. He would do all kinds of stuff. He had a really big legend his own self.
Right. And Bruce knew the guy, and he saw the guy, and he was like, you know what? I'm gonna reach that level of fame, and that level of movie, and he did, which is insane. Or I mean,
he definitely did.
Yeah, or maybe in some way surpassed. Yeah.
Yeah, because he's more of an international star. Everybody loves Steve McQueen, but I mean, you could go to Russia, you could go to all the Asian countries, you could go pretty much anywhere, and people know Bruce Lee. He has statues built of him in weird places. Like, yeah, it's real.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, for sure. It would have been, with his genius mind, like we were saying, that he was able to predict a lot of the things before the UFC even came along. Stuff about MMA and cross training and stuff like that. He opened the doors to all that, broke racism. It's like, no, you can't teach non-Chinese kung fu. He was like, I don't care. I'm gonna mix it with boxing. I don't care, fencing, savate, whatever. And so he had this kind of mixture at that time. So then, if he was alive today, what else would he have done, right? That's kind of the things
There's a few names in coaching nowadays. There's Emmanuel Stewart, who passed away. There's Freddie Roach. There's John Danaher for MMA. In my opinion, Bruce Lee, if he was still here, he would have been a staple. He would have been one of those high class, like A coaches of all time. And it's sad, because he wasn't just. A lot of people think that he's just a movie star. No, he motivated a lot of people. His greatest legacy, in my opinion, is that he motivates people to get up off the couch, to start doing some push-ups. Hey, let me start doing some finger push-ups. Oh, I can't do that yet. Let me start off, little by little. Let me build myself.
Right.
That's the main legacy of a Bruce Lee, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, is he's motivational, and he gets people to look at themselves and say, you know what, I can do better, and I could find the strength inside me, and I could become something great like a Bruce Lee. And even though he was a 5'7", 135-pound man, when you talk about a Bruce Lee, he can destroy anybody, and that's what a Bruce Lee is to me.
Right. Yeah, that image, that motivation, that inspiration, aspiration, he aspires you. And it's not about, like, I agree with you 100%. It's not about, he's the greatest martial artist of all time because he could whip everyone's butt. No, because he didn't do that. He's the greatest martial artist of all time because he inspired a ton of people more than anybody else. That's why.
So many generations.
Yes.
So many.
Yes.
Name another martial artist that inspired so many generations. We're only talking about the high echelon of the Muhammad Ali's, of the Mike Tysons, of the George Foremans. You know what I'm saying? Like, only the top tier. And Bruce Lee, yes, the movie star is on that list.
Yeah.
So the one is as real as it gets, even though he wasn't a tournament or elite level fighter, professional fighter, excuse me.
So without having those kinds of credentials, and all he had was the movies, why do you think he was? You think it was just charisma, or what?
It was definitely his persona. It's definitely his charisma. I mean, he held himself to such a high standard. You couldn't even look at him sideways. He would have a problem with you. It's not that he was a bad person or a bully, but he always had a chip on his shoulder from anybody that you would hear take an interview, talk about Bruce Lee. They always said, you didn't mess around with Bruce Lee. When Bruce Lee walked into a building, you knew who he was. And he just carried himself that way. So, yeah, it had to, martial arts, 90% is mentality. So if you see a guy like that, and you see the way that he holds himself, you see the way that he trains, you see that he only cares about martial concepts and the way that he puts it together, do you really want to mess with a guy like that?
No.
A guy who could and say, I'm going to smack you across the face and you're not going to stop me, and then commence to do it over and over. You really don't want to mess with that guy, real or not. I'm talking about real life. Do you really want to engage with this human being right now? Possibly not.
Right. No, for sure, man. The guy, yeah, he definitely had that charisma, the personality, willingness to prove it, right? That's what you're saying, basically. And
oh yeah, he took on all kinds of challenges. I've never seen him, but he had street fights,
And people like stunt people and stuff challenge him, or people on the crew of the filming set, they would challenge him and stuff, and yeah, he
left and right, all the time.
Right, he had no problem trying to prove to them, like, hey man, know your role, kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, he's really building the persona, and like, he's really showing the world of what a martial artist used to be. We don't do that no more. It's not really accepted in society to be so masculine. They call it toxic nowadays, but he really showed a lot of people how to be, quote unquote, a man, quote unquote, a martial artist and stuff. So, that was his thing,
The people that knew him, though, they did say that he was very charming, so that maybe he also did that in a charming way. And also, like, to other guys, he could come across as very knowledgeable and educated as far as martial arts goes. So he could talk to you in depth about philosophy and all this other stuff. So he presented both. So for the guys that wanted to act tough, he could talk to you that way. But then the other guys that are more intellectual, he could also do that too. He could, obviously in his books, you could see it. I mean, he has everything.
Oh yeah, he could walk in all phases of life, speak to in those days, like we were talking about racism, he can walk into any room with any white man and be comfortable. In China, he didn't grow up the richest, so he grew up a little bit more poorer. So he had that going for him. He had it all. He had it all. He had street smarts. He was educated.
Yeah.
There was nothing he could do, basically.
And I think also here in the
He was a
U.S.
ladies' man. He could dance.
Sorry, go ahead.
He was also a ladies' man. He could dance. He also was the first guy to say, as a martial artist, dancing helps you as a martial artist. Vasily Lomachenko, his father forced him to start doing Russian dance.
Oh.
And look at the way that they call him the Matrix,
Right, right. And I feel like here in the U.S. also, he probably appealed to a lot of people, young people too, because he had that rebellious attitude where he was like, I don't have to just train in one style. I can combine stuff. Don't tell me to just be in one style,
He just wanted to be the best. He didn't see the point of practicing one thing. It was useless to him. He wanted to be the best.
And I think that appeals to a lot of people that they were like, well, yeah, I like this style and this style and this style. Why can't I do that too? But I think at that time, especially old school, in the 60s and stuff, they were like, you're going to train judo. You're going to be here at least 4, 5, 6 years.
Yeah. No, yeah. Martial arts back in the day was very strict. It was really, really strict. And sadly, a lot of people after the time of Bruce Lee wanted up going into bad karate classes, bad dojos, and saying that, no, I'll give you a belt in 2 weeks. So there's a lot of con artists in martial arts. But yeah, back in the days, martial arts was no joke. It was taken very serious, very much like when you watch the movies, the Karate Kid and Mr. Miyagi and what are the rules of the martial arts dojo. It was another world back then, very serious world.
Yeah. So for him to come out of that and say the things that he did and cross train and all this kind of stuff, open your mind and I think that really appealed to a lot of young rebellious people, and they were like, you know what, martial arts is hip. It's not just go to the dojo and stay there all day and be like a monk.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, so okay, we're past the 20-minute mark again. I think we covered a lot here about what if Bruce Lee he had continued to grace us with his presence, and what more contributions would he have made. So this was kind of like a what if talk. So anyway, thank you for joining us. Wmpyr, over and out.
Thank you very much. Have a good.
Thank you. Later, guys.